The familiarity that didn't belong. I remember exactly what the classroom smelled like the day I started suspecting my marriage had developed a second address. Crayons, hand soap, and that faint sugary note of apple slices left too long in a plastic container. The kind of smell that promises you everything is simple. Children are safe, adults are responsible. Tomorrow will look like today. Bright Harbor Academy had a way of selling certainty. Pale wood shelves lined with picture books. Calm, curated chaos. Seasonal crafts arranged as if childhood itself could be managed with binder clips and pastel labels. Madison Reed stood by the cubbies with a clipboard hugged against her chest, her posture relaxed in the way people are when they know exactly where they belong. She had the kind of face parents trusted, open, attentive, never tired in public. The kind that made you feel mildly guilty for having adult problems in a place built for finger paint. "Owen did great today," she said, bending to zip my son's jacket. "He helped Caleb clean up without being asked." Owen grinned, pride shining through his missing front tooth. "I was a helper." "You were," Madison said. Her smile tilted toward him, then lifted to me. "He's getting more confident." I thanked her. I meant it. Teachers like Madison were the reason I could answer emails at 10 a.m. without the sour fear that my child might be crying somewhere, unseen. Then she said my name. Not Mrs. Hale, not Claire Hale, just Claire. A small thing, a friendly thing. The sort of thing that could mean warmth and community and the slow loosening of formality between adults who saw each other every weekday. Except she didn't say it like she was warming up to me. She said it like she'd already used it privately. Her eyes went past my shoulder before returning. Not scanning the room, scanning the door. Anticipation disguised as casual attention. I turned slightly, reflexive, to see what she saw. The hallway beyond the classroom was empty. No late parents. No director hovering with a schedule. Just a strip of clean floor and the muffled sound of another class singing a song about leaves. Madison adjusted the clipboard against her ribs, the movement practiced. "We'll see you tomorrow." Owen tugged my hand. "Mom, can we get the blue gummies? The shark ones?" "We'll see," I said, and then to Madison, "Thanks again." Madison nodded, her smile holding steady. It was her eyes that shifted, quick and involuntary, as if she'd remembered something she wasn't supposed to show. I walked Owen out. The glass doors opened with a soft pneumatic sigh. Outside, early October had turned the trees on Maple Avenue into bright, impatient fire. The air smelled like cold sun and distant lake water. Owen skipped beside me, talking about a caterpillar they'd found on the playground. I listened, answered in the right places, but my mind replayed the moment. Madison's voice shaped my name. At home, I did what I always did. Shoes in the tray, Owen's lunchbox rinsed, a load of laundry started before the day could harden into night. I worked from the kitchen table, my laptop open, my brain switching between brand decks and meeting notes, the normal architecture of my life. Around 5, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Daniel, I can grab Owen tomorrow if you want. You've had a long week." It was a considerate message, the kind husbands sent, the kind wives appreciated. Except Daniel didn't usually know when I'd had a long week. He knew my calendar in theory, not in practice. He was the sort of man who loved me sincerely but lived in a world where affection was assumed to be understood. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Me. "I'm fine, but if you want, sure." Daniel. "Great. See you soon." I set the phone down and tried to return to my work. The cursor blinked in the middle of a sentence about consumer behavior in uncertain markets. Blink, blink, blink. I thought about the way Daniel had started mentioning Bright Harbor in casual conversation. Owen's doing well. Their curriculum seems solid. That teacher, Madison, right? She's great with him. He'd said her name as if it belonged on his tongue. When I'd asked, "How do you know her name?" He'd shrugged and replied, "You say it all the time." Which was untrue. Not dramatically untrue. Not the kind of lie that made a person flinch. Just wrong enough to pass if you didn't bother to hold it up to the light. At 6:20, Daniel came home. He kissed Owen first, a quick scoop and a laugh, then kissed me in the kitchen with the soft, familiar pressure of routine. He smelled like aftershave and office air, that dry, climate-controlled sterility that made me think of conference rooms. "Dinner smells good," he said. "It's pasta," I replied. "No heroism?" Daniel loosened his tie. His eyes flicked to the counter. "Anything from school today?" "Normal," I said. I watched his face while I said it. Madison said Owen helped clean up. Daniel smiled. "That's our kid." The smile held too smoothly, like a mask that fit well because it had been worn before. Madison really seems to know how to bring kids out of their shells. There it was again, her name, used effortlessly. "You're picking him up tomorrow," I said. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "I don't mind." I didn't say you minded. My voice stayed light. I stirred sauce that didn't need stirring. Daniel's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down. His hand moved quickly, turning the screen toward himself, thumb tapping. The motion could have been nothing. People checked their phones. The world was built for that kind of distraction. But I saw the way his shoulders tightened for half a second, as if the message had slipped a finger beneath his collar. "Work?" I asked. He said, too fast. "Just something about a filing." He put the phone face down. I served dinner. We sat. Owen narrated his day between bites, describing the caterpillar like it was a celebrity. Daniel laughed at the right moments, asked the correct questions, played the role of engaged father with the competence of someone trained to perform. And maybe he was engaged. Maybe he was trying. Maybe my suspicion was nothing more than the natural anxiety of a woman who'd learned that happiness was never a permanent state, only a temporary agreement. After Owen went to bed, I cleaned up while Daniel took a call in his office. Our house was not large, but Daniel had claimed the spare bedroom as a workspace early in the pandemic and never released it. He said he needed a door between himself and the rest of life. I understood that. I had my own ways of creating distance. His voice drifted down the hallway, low and controlled. Not the voice he used with clients, too cold for that. Not the voice he used with Owen, too warm for that. Something in between, intimate without being tender. I wiped the counter twice. I loaded the dishwasher even though it wasn't full. I lingered near the hallway as if I needed something from the linen closet. Then his voice sharpened into a hush. I caught a few words. Not over text. A pause. I said I would handle it. Another pause, longer this time, as if he were listening to someone who wouldn't accept the answer. "Tomorrow," Daniel said. "After pickup." My hand stopped moving. After pickup. It could have meant anything. It could have meant he was coordinating with another parent for a carpool. It could have meant he was discussing a school donation. It could have meant work scheduling. But the phrase landed in me like an object dropped into still water. No splash, just ripples widening, until the whole surface trembled. Daniel ended the call. His office door opened. He appeared in the hallway, adjusting his sleeve like he'd been doing something important and private. He looked at me and smiled. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just tired?" he asked, stepping closer. "Just tired." Daniel leaned in and kissed my temple. "I'll grab Owen tomorrow and let you sleep in." I watched him walk into our bedroom. watched the way he moved through our house with entitlement and ease. A man who believed the life around him was stable because he had built it. When he disappeared, I stood in the hallway and listened to the house settle. Pipes ticking, the refrigerator humming, the faint rush of cars outside. Upstairs, Owen's small breaths rose and fell like waves. And in my pocket, my phone buzzed. Not a message from Daniel, not a calendar reminder, not an email from work. A notification from Bright Harbor's parent app. Bright Harbor Academy. Reminder. Fall Festival Planning Committee meeting. Tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Volunteers welcome. I hadn't signed up to volunteer. Daniel hadn't mentioned a meeting. But Madison had looked past my shoulder today like someone was expected to arrive. I opened the app and scrolled through the comments. Parents posting ideas. Sign-up sheets. A cheerful photo from last year's festival. Kids in costumes. Teachers laughing. In the background of the photo, barely noticeable unless you were already looking for fractures, a man's reflection appeared in the glass door. Broad shoulders, dark hair, a navy suit that didn't belong on a playground. My husband. And beside him, close enough that the space between them looked like a decision, Madison Reed smiled up at him as if she'd just told him something that made the world lighter. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have shown Daniel the photo right then. I could have said his name and watched him flinch. I could have demanded the truth like it was a right owed to me. Instead, I took a screenshot. Information first. Emotion later. That was my rule. And as I saved the image, I realized something that made my stomach go cold. Not about Daniel, not about Madison, but about myself. I wasn't afraid of losing my husband. I was afraid of losing the version of my life where I didn't have to become a detective in my own home. The rules of quiet. By morning, the screenshot had turned into a fact I could carry without touching. I woke before Daniel, before the house remembered it was supposed to be warm. The sky outside our bedroom windows was a dull pewter, Lake Michigan hidden behind a curtain of low cloud. Evanston mornings had a way of looking honest even when nothing else was. Daniel slept on his back, one hand resting on the sheet as if he owned even the air between us. His face was smooth in sleep, unmarred by the expressions he practiced during the day. Concern, patience, that careful interest he used on judges and board members, and, apparently, preschool teachers. I slid out of bed without waking him, moved through the hallway, and stood for a moment outside Owen's room. His door was cracked open, a sliver of nightlight spilling out. He'd kicked off his blanket sometime after midnight. One small foot dangled over the edge of the mattress like a careless declaration of trust. I tucked the blanket back over him and tried not to imagine trust as something that could be misused. In the kitchen, I made coffee and opened my laptop, not because I had work to do, but because a screen made me look normal. People who are about to do something reckless often begin by rehearsing normality. The parent app notification still glowed in my recent alerts. Fall Festival Planning Committee. Volunteers welcome. I clicked into the event, read the comments again. Names I recognized, names I didn't. Madison had posted a cheery reminder about bringing candy donations. Bright Harbor's director, Mrs. Lasky, had replied, with an exclamation point. I scrolled to last year's photo. I enlarged it. I stared at the reflection until it stopped looking like a coincidence. It wasn't just Daniel. It was Daniel's posture, angled toward Madison, attentive. It was Madison's head tilt, the soft display of intimacy she would never have offered in front of me. It was the way her mouth formed a smile meant for one person. People didn't accidentally look like that. A door creaked behind me. Daniel entered the kitchen in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair rumpled, phone already in his hand like an extra limb. "Morning," he said. He kissed the top of my head. I inhaled. Coffee, his shampoo, the faint metallic note of his phone case when he set it on the counter. "Morning," I answered. He opened the fridge. I'll do pickup today. Same time? Yes, I said. Owen's got his dinosaur rain boots in the closet. He'll insist. Daniel smiled, too quick. I'll remember. His ISM phone vibrated. His eyes dropped. For a fraction of a second, his face tightened again. Not with fear, but with calculation. The kind of micro-expression I'd learned to catch in conference rooms, where people negotiated with their mouths while their eyes betrayed them. He thumbed the screen. Didn't answer. Set the phone down. What's the fall festival meeting? I asked lightly, as if it had just occurred to me. Daniel's hand paused on the coffee mug. What meeting? The app reminder, I said. Planning committee at 5:30. You didn't mention it. He took a sip. Oh, that. It's not a big deal. Mrs. Lasky asked if I'd sit in for legal questions. They're dealing with liability stuff. Since when do preschools have liability stuff? I asked. Daniel gave a small shrug. Since parents sue over everything. It was plausible. It was also an answer that ended the conversation. Daniel's specialty wasn't lying. It was making the truth seem like an unreasonable thing to request. I nodded as if satisfied. Inside him, relief flickered, brief, impatient. He wanted me distracted. He wanted me to accept the surface story so he could keep managing the deeper one. In his mind, he wasn't a villain. He was a man juggling obligations, trying to keep the household stable, trying not to upset Owen's life. He framed his secrecy as protection, because that made it easier to live with. And Madison, somewhere across town, was getting dressed for school with a different narrative running through her. She would stand in front of her closet and consider the line between professional and personal, like it was a skirt hem she could adjust. She wasn't stupid. She knew the optics. She knew the risk. But risk felt different when someone kept telling you that you were special, that you understood him in a way no one else did, that this was temporary until he sorted things out. People didn't fall into affairs. They stepped into them one choice at a time, wearing shoes they'd pretended not to notice. By 8, Owen was fed, dressed, and arguing with me about whether dinosaurs could wear scarves. They can if they want, I said. They don't have hands, he countered. You don't need hands for a scarf, I replied. Daniel watched from the doorway, smiling. His eyes stayed on Owen, not on me. It looked like love. It might even have been love. Love didn't prevent betrayal. It just gave it better alibis. When Daniel left with Owen, I stood at the window and watched them walk to the car. Owen climbed into the back seat. Daniel leaned in to buckle him, a father's careful hands doing what they were supposed to do. Then Daniel glanced up, toward the street, toward nothing in particular. The gesture felt like a check-in. I waited until their car disappeared. Then I did what I'd trained myself to do for years in marketing. I mapped the system. Bright Harbor wasn't just a school. It was a network, parent emails, volunteer lists, social groups, board members, people, money, reputation. And Daniel, with his law firm polish, fit into networks the way oil fit into gears. I opened the Bright Harbor email archives and searched my inbox for incident, report, policy. I didn't expect much. Schools didn't put mess in writing unless they had to. What I found instead was a pattern of blandness. Cheerful newsletters, reminders about Spirit Week, requests for donations. But there was a gap in late August, an entire week with no communications at all. That was unusual. Bright Harbor emailed like a nervous habit. I clicked into the parent forum section of the app and read back through threads. There was a post from a mother I vaguely knew, Rachel Kim, dated August 29th. Rachel K., does anyone know why the seaside room teacher changed so suddenly? My daughter says Ms. Hart went away. Just curious. Replies followed, shrug emojis in, other people's lives, speculation about a family emergency, a vague comment from someone claiming it's confidential, then a final reply from the director's account. Mrs. Lasky, thank you for your understanding. Staff changes are handled with care and privacy. The thread locked immediately after. Privacy, handled with care. Language meant to soothe. Language meant to hide. I sat back and stared at the screen. My coffee had gone cold. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly, as if it resented being ignored. Daniel had said he was attending the meeting for liability stuff. Liability didn't appear from nowhere. It appeared after someone got hurt. I heard my own breathing. Steady, controlled. I was not a woman spiraling. I was a woman collecting data. Around noon, I called Rachel Kim. She picked up on the second ring, her voice cautious. Hello? Rachel, it's Claire Hale, Owen's mom. Oh, hi. A pause. Everything okay? I smiled to myself. Even strangers could hear concern differently when you were calling out of nowhere in the middle of a workday. Everything's fine, I said. I saw your post back in August about the seaside room teacher change. I've been meaning to ask, did you ever find out what happened? Rachel exhaled, a sound like she'd been holding something in for months. No, not officially. But, another pause. There are rumors. About what? I kept my voice calm, gentle. People gave you more when you didn't sound hungry for it. Rachel lowered her voice anyway. There was an incident. A kid got hurt. Not like scraped knee hurt. Enough that someone threatened to call the state. My throat tightened. Do you know which kid? Rachel hesitated. No one says? That's the point. They made it disappear. And Ms. Hart? I asked. She's gone, Rachel said. And then suddenly the school gets a big anonymous donation for facility improvements. Like 2 weeks later, people talk. People always talk. Facility improvements, donations, liability. Daniel's world. I thanked Rachel and ended the call, my hands steady even as the house seemed to tilt. This was bigger than an affair, I thought. But even as I tried to frame it as civic concern, my mind kept returning to Madison. To her eyes searching the hallway yesterday. To Daniel saying, tomorrow, after pickup. After pickup could mean a meeting about an incident. It could mean coordinating a cover-up. It could mean something else entirely. It could mean Madison in a quiet car, hands folded like a good teacher, while my husband explained how problems were managed, how complaints were neutralized, how narratives were controlled. A love story for people who preferred strategy to tenderness. At 3:12, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Daniel. Pickup went great. Madison says Owen's been really proud lately. We're going to stop for hot chocolate, Madison says. My fingers hovered over the screen. The message was innocent on its face. A father doing something kind. A teacher making an observation. But it read like a report. Like proof of contact. Like a subtle way of telling me, I'm there, with her, and you can't stop it. I typed back. Me. Sounds nice. See you at dinner. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened our shared Apple account and checked the device list. Daniel had always insisted on keeping things simple. Shared calendars, shared subscriptions, family plans. Efficiency disguised as intimacy. Our devices were linked. Location services were on. His phone had been in Evanston at pickup time. Now, the dot moved south, toward Chicago. Hot chocolate didn't require a highway. I watched the map like it was a film I couldn't pause. The little blue dot slid along the arterial roads with quiet inevitability. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I simply felt the moment when my internal rules shifted. Up until now, I'd collected information from the edges, like a woman trying not to disturb her own life. But Daniel wasn't stopping for hot chocolate. He was going somewhere he hadn't bothered to name. And if I wanted the truth, I would have to leave the safe role of wife and step into the role I'd been avoiding since the first screenshot. Detective. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and my phone charger. I left a note on the counter for Daniel in case he came home and wondered where I'd gone. Ran out. Back soon. It was the kind of note that made people underestimate you. Outside, the air had sharpened into late afternoon chill. Hint of rain. The trees along the street lifted their leaves like hands surrendering. I got into my car, started the engine, and followed the blue dot's path on my screen. As I pulled away from the curb, the thought arrived with a clarity that felt almost cruel. If Daniel was willing to drag our son's preschool into his private life, then he wasn't only risking my marriage. He was risking Owen's world. And I wasn't going to let anyone gamble with my child and call it love. What the school didn't say. I didn't follow Daniel all the way into the city. That was the first boundary I drew. And it surprised me how easily it appeared. Clean, deliberate, like a line I'd been waiting to step up to. I tracked the blue dot until it slipped off Lakeshore Drive and disappeared into the dense geometry of downtown. Then I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and turned off the engine. If I crossed that line too soon, I'd lose the advantage of not being seen. Surveillance wasn't about proximity. It was about patience. I sat there for several minutes, hands on the steering wheel, letting my breathing slow. Around me, ordinary life continued. Carts clattered, car doors shut. A couple argued quietly about dinner plans. No one knew that a private system had begun to fail, that a marriage was revealing its fault lines through data points and absences. I drove home instead. By the time Daniel and Owen returned, empty-handed, no hot chocolate cups in sight, it was already dark. I heard the garage door rise, then the thud of the door into the mudroom, Owen's voice bright and loud. "Mom, Dad says we can do costumes early this year." I stepped into the hallway, smiled, crouched to Owen's level. "That's exciting." Daniel stood behind him, keys in hand, his face relaxed in a way it hadn't been that morning. Whatever had happened downtown had settled something for him. That, more than anything else, made me careful. "We ran into traffic," he said, offering the explanation without being asked. "Hot chocolate line was insane." I nodded. "That happens." He watched my face, waiting for a question I didn't ask. When it didn't come, relief flickered again, followed by a subtle recalibration. He'd been granted silence. He would use it. After dinner, after Owen's bath and story time, Daniel retreated to his office under the pretense of emails. I let him go. I opened my laptop and returned to Bright Harbor. This time, I didn't look at what was there. I looked at what wasn't. The August gap in emails still bothered me. I pulled up archived newsletters from June and July, then September. Same cadence, same formatting, same upbeat tone. August was a clean break. No apology for the silence, no acknowledgement of summer transitions. I cross-checked the school calendar. Staff training week ran August 21 to 25. The email gap began August 22. I searched Ms. Hart. Nothing. I searched Seaside Room. Nothing. I searched Incident. Nothing. Silence wasn't accidental. It was curated. I opened the donor acknowledgement list, public, but buried 3 clicks deep on the school's website. Bright Harbor liked to appear transparent without being accessible. There it was. An anonymous contribution listed as foundational gift, dated September 7th. Amount undisclosed, but marked with a star indicating it exceeded the usual threshold. Foundational. A word that implied rescue. I thought of Daniel's law firm, of the way donations were used to support community partners in exchange for goodwill. I thought of liability and hush money dressed up as generosity. I didn't need to imagine too much. I just needed confirmation. The next morning, I volunteered. Not officially, not loudly. I emailed Mrs. Lasky and offered to help with fall festival setup, booths, supplies, anything logistical. I cited my flexible schedule and my experience in project coordination, which was true enough to sound impressive without inviting scrutiny. She replied within an hour. Mrs. Lasky, we'd love the extra help. Come by after drop-off tomorrow and I'll show you what we need. The smiley face at the end felt forced, like punctuation added after the decision had already been made. The following day, I dressed deliberately. Jeans, boots, a sweater neutral enough to suggest approachability. I dropped Owen off myself. Madison greeted us with her usual composure, her voice steady, her smile intact. She didn't call me Claire this time. She called me Mrs. Hale. The correction landed between us like a chess move. I smiled back, polite, unreadable. See you this afternoon. Her eyes flicked to Owen, then to the door. Have a good day. In the director's office, Mrs. Lasky busied herself with supply lists and clipboards. She was a woman who believed order could be imposed through systems and tone. She talked while she worked, filling the air with details about booths and permits and parent expectations. I listened. I waited. At one point, she stepped out to take a call, leaving me alone among filing cabinets and framed certificates. The door didn't fully close. I stood. I didn't touch anything at first. I let the moment breathe. Then I opened the nearest cabinet. Folders were labeled by year. I scanned quickly, methodically. Tuition, enrollment, staff evaluations. There was a separate drawer at the bottom, locked. That, more than anything, told me where to look. I didn't force it. I wasn't reckless. I took a photo of the cabinet label with my phone and returned to my seat before Mrs. Lasky came back. You're very organized, I said when she returned. It must be a lot to manage. She smiled, pleased. We do our best to protect the children. Protect. Another word that hid as much as it revealed. That afternoon, after Owen was settled at home, I made 2 calls. The first was to a friend who worked in facilities management for a charter school downtown. I didn't mention Bright Harbor by name. I asked hypotheticals about incident reporting, about state regulations, about what required mandatory disclosure. The second call was to my own firm's legal compliance consultant, off the books, framed as curiosity. Both conversations pointed in the same direction. If a child had been hurt badly enough to involve the state, documentation would be unavoidable. If documentation was missing, someone had intervened. Someone with legal expertise. Someone like my husband. That evening, Daniel was quiet, distracted. He ate without appetite, answered Owen's questions absently, checked his phone more often than usual. I watched him from across the table, noting the changes in his posture. He was managing multiple narratives now. That took energy. After Owen went to bed, Daniel poured himself a drink, rare for him on a weekday. He didn't offer me one. Long day? I asked. Complicated, he said. Work? He hesitated. Community stuff. I nodded. Bright Harbor? He looked up sharply, then smoothed his expression. Yes. I met his eyes. They're lucky to have you. The compliment unsettled him. Praise required acceptance, and acceptance implied complicity. He drained his glass. I'm just trying to help. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. Not because he said it, but because of how he said it. Daniel believed he was doing the right thing. He believed that smoothing over a school incident, protecting reputations, keeping donors calm and parents quiet, was a net good. He believed that his affair with Madison existed in a separate moral category: personal, unfortunate, manageable. He didn't see how the two had fused. Madison, meanwhile, moved through her days with increasing precision. She corrected her tone, her posture, her distance. She avoided eye contact with me, then sought it out, as if trying to measure how much I knew. She wasn't reckless, she was contained, which meant someone was containing her. The following afternoon, I lingered at pickup. Parents clustered, chatting. Kids spilled out, loud and unfiltered. Madison handed Owen to me with professional cheer. He had a good day. I'm glad, I said. As we turned to leave, she spoke again, lower this time. Mrs. Hale? Yes? Her voice wavered, just slightly. If you ever have questions about things, about the school, you can ask me. I studied her face, the careful makeup, the tension around her eyes, the way her hands gripped the clipboard like a shield. Thank you, I said. I will. Her relief was immediate and followed by fear, quick and sharp. She had extended an olive branch she wasn't authorized to offer. As Owen and I walked to the car, I felt the shape of the story shifting. This wasn't just about an affair uncovered. It was about a system that depended on silence. A school that needed protection. A man who provided it. A woman who became collateral. And a child, maybe more than one, who had paid the price for adults deciding what was best. That night, I drafted an email and didn't send it. I organized screenshots, timestamps, donation records. I created a folder and named it plainly, Bright Harbor. I wasn't angry yet. I was focused. Because when secrets overlapped, they didn't cancel each other out. They multiplied, and somewhere between a locked filing cabinet and a teacher's quiet plea, I realized that the truth, when it came, would not be something I could reveal privately. It would need witnesses. Crossing the line. The city at dusk always looked like a negotiation. Steel and glass catching the last light, the lake turning dark before the sky did, traffic pulsing south like a bloodstream that refused to rest. I'd lived close enough to Chicago long enough to mistake familiarity for immunity. But that evening, as I drove downtown with my phone mounted low on the dash and Daniel's location glowing calmly on the map, the city felt alert to me, as if it knew I was arriving with intent. I parked 2 blocks away from the dot and walked the rest of the distance. That decision mattered. Distance kept me from rushing. It let the city absorb my nerves. I counted steps, matched my pace to the flow of people leaving offices, shoulders hunched against the cold. I was just another woman heading somewhere after work, coat zipped, expression neutral. The dot stopped moving near a hotel off Michigan Avenue, not one of the iconic ones, not a place tourists bragged about. A narrow building wedged between a bank and a boutique, its lobby set back from the street as if privacy were part of the service. I stood across the street and waited. Waiting wasn't passive, it was a discipline. I scanned reflections in windows, tracked entrances, noted where light pooled and where it didn't. I'd learned years ago that the most revealing moments happen not in grand gestures, but in transitions, people entering or exiting spaces where they believed they were unseen. At 6:42, Daniel emerged. He didn't look guilty. That was the first thing I noticed. He looked resolved. His tie was loosened, his jacket unbuttoned. He checked his phone, typed quickly, then slipped it back into his pocket. He stood there for a moment, shoulders squared, like a man preparing to step back into a role he understood well. Then Madison appeared beside him. She wore a coat I hadn't seen before, camel-colored, tailored, expensive enough to signal intention without screaming for attention. Her hair was pulled back, not in the school-appropriate low ponytail, but in a style that exposed her neck, deliberate and vulnerable. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The space between them was charged, calibrated. They stood close enough to share heat, far enough to claim propriety if anyone happened to look. Daniel said something. Madison's mouth tightened. Then she shook her head. He leaned in slightly. She didn't pull away. I raised my phone and took a photo, then another. My hands steady. The lens caught the angle of his body, toward hers, the way her fingers curled into the sleeve of her coat as if holding herself in place. This wasn't a spontaneous affair, fueled by bad decisions and weak boundaries. This was sustained. Managed. They started walking south, toward the river. I followed at a distance, my reflection flickering in shop windows. At one point, Madison stopped abruptly. Daniel turned to face her. She spoke, fast, low. Her hands moved, sharp gestures cutting through the air. Daniel's posture changed. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. That was the moment I almost stepped forward. Not to confront them, to interrupt. Something in her body language, a tension I recognized too well, suggested she was trying to extract herself from something that had grown larger than her consent. Daniel spoke again, slower now. He held up a hand, palm open, a lawyer's gesture of reassurance. Madison's shoulders sagged. She nodded. The negotiation concluded. They resumed walking, closer, now. Daniel's hand brushed her back, not lingering but guiding. Ownership disguised as care. I filmed the rest. I stopped when they reached the parking garage. I watched them disappear into the structure, then turned away. My chest tight, but my thoughts oddly clear. I had proof, but proof alone wasn't enough. In my car, I sat for several minutes without starting the engine. I replayed the footage once, then again. The images were clean, undeniable. But what struck me most wasn't the intimacy. It was the argument. That wasn't lovers' tension. That was leverage. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't rehearse confrontations or imagine explanations. My mind worked the problem the way it always did, breaking it into parts, identifying dependencies. Daniel had leverage over Madison. The school had leverage over both of them. And somewhere beneath that structure, a child's silence had been purchased. When I got home, the house was dark. Daniel hadn't returned yet. Owen's nightlight glowed upstairs, a soft square of reassurance. I stood at the bottom of the stairs longer than necessary, grounding myself in the ordinary. Then I went to my laptop. I created a second folder inside Bright Harbor and named it Chicago. I uploaded the photos, the video, time-stamped and backed up to a cloud Daniel didn't have access to. I added notes, time, location, context. I wrote like a witness, not a wife. At 9:18, Daniel texted, "Daniel, running late. Don't wait up." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened LinkedIn and searched for one name: Evan Brooks. Evan Brooks was a parent at Bright Harbor. Quiet, observant, the kind of man people underestimated because he didn't speak unless he had something precise to say. He worked as an investigative journalist for a regional outlet that specialized in public interest reporting. I knew this because I'd looked him up weeks earlier, when I'd first noticed how carefully he listened during parent meetings. I drafted a message and deleted it. Then I drafted another. Me. "Hi, Evan. This is Claire Hale, Owen's mom. I have concerns about Bright Harbor that may involve undisclosed incidents and improper handling. I have documentation. If this is something you'd be willing to discuss confidentially, I'd appreciate it." I stared at the message, aware that once sent, it couldn't be unsent. Then I pressed send. Daniel came home after 10. I heard the garage door, the careful quiet of someone hoping not to be noticed. He entered the bedroom, showered, slipped into bed without touching me. I lay awake, listening to his breathing, wondering if he was relieved or restless. Somewhere in the city, Madison was likely lying awake too, her phone face down, her future narrowing. The next morning, Evan replied, "Evan, I'm willing to listen. Coffee today?" I agreed. We met at a cafe near the lake. Public, neutral. Evan arrived early, notebook tucked under his arm. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "What do you have?" he asked. I told him enough to make him lean forward. I showed him redacted screenshots, donation records, the email gap, the footage from downtown with faces blurred except where legally permissible. He didn't interrupt. He asked questions only when something mattered. "This goes beyond an affair," he said finally. "Yes," I replied. "The affair is just how I found it." He nodded. "If there's a cover-up involving a school and a minor, this becomes serious fast." "I know." "Are you prepared for fallout?" he asked. I thought of Owen, of Madison's face when she'd asked me to ask questions, of Daniel's certainty that he was doing good. "No," I said, "but I'm prepared for the truth." We agreed on boundaries. He would corroborate independently. He would protect sources. He would not publish without ironclad confirmation. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed again. A message from Madison. Madison, "Mrs. Hale, could we talk? Not at school, please." The word please sat there, heavy. I didn't answer immediately. I walked to my car, sat and considered the implications. This was the line the outline had warned me about, the point where observation turned into engagement. I replied, "Me. I can meet. One condition, complete honesty." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Madison, I understand. We met that afternoon in a small park halfway between Bright Harbor and my house. It was cold enough to keep people moving, not lingering. Madison arrived first, pacing near a bench. When she saw me, she straightened, composure snapping into place like a uniform. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I didn't come to comfort you," I replied. "I came to understand." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat. The lake was visible through bare trees, gray and unyielding. "I didn't plan this," Madison said quickly. "Any of it." "Plan what?" I asked. She swallowed. "Daniel, the situation, everything." I let silence do the work. "There was an incident," she continued. "In August. A child was hurt during nap time, not in my class. Another room." "Seaside room," I said. Her eyes flicked up. "Yes." "What happened?" She hesitated. "Supervision failure. The official story is still being reviewed." "And the unofficial one?" Madison's hands trembled. She clenched them together. The parents threatened to report it. The director panicked. The board panicked. "And Daniel?" She looked away. "They asked him to advise. He's good at making problems. Smaller." "And you?" I asked. "They needed someone to support the narrative," she said. "Someone parents trusted. Someone visible." "So they used you?" She flinched. "At first. And later?" Her voice dropped. "Later it got complicated. Because of the affair." "Yes." She met my eyes then, tears threatening but not falling. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds like you crossed a line," I said, "and then found out it wasn't yours to uncross." Madison nodded slowly. "He told me he was protecting the school, protecting the kids." "And did you believe him?" "I wanted to," she said, "because the alternative was admitting I was complicit." The word landed between us like an object neither of us wanted to pick up. "Why ask to meet me?" I asked. "Because I can't do this anymore," Madison said. "Because he's not letting it end. Because if this comes out the way they want it to, it'll land on me." I thought of Daniel's hand on her back, guiding. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Madison's voice barely carried. "I want out. And I want the truth to matter." I stood. Then you'll need to speak to Evan Brooks. Her eyes widened. Fear, then relief. You already… Yes, I said. And if you try to protect Daniel now, you'll lose whatever protection you think you have. She nodded, defeated and resolute at once. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Daniel, we need to talk tonight. I looked out at the lake, at the steady refusal of water to pretend it was anything but cold. Yes, I typed back. We do. Because the line had been crossed, and there was no going back to the version of my life where silence passed for peace. Complicity and leverage. Daniel waited until after Owen was asleep to talk. He always had. Difficult conversations in our marriage were treated like adult content, shielded from small ears, postponed until the house was quiet enough to absorb impact without witnesses. It had once felt respectful. Now it felt strategic. He stood in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, hands braced against the counter as if steadying himself. The overhead light cast a hard shadow along his jaw, sharpening a face I'd memorized over 10 years and was only now learning to read correctly. We need to clear the air, he said. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded, not defensively, but deliberately. Distance mattered. Go on, I replied. Daniel exhaled. You've been distant. I can tell something's wrong. The phrasing was precise. He hadn't said I've done something wrong. He'd said something's wrong, as if the problem existed independently of him. I know about Chicago, I said. The effect was immediate. Not shock, not denial. Calculation. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward Owen's room, then back to me. His shoulders eased a fraction, as if he'd been preparing for a more chaotic accusation and was relieved to find the conversation contained. Claire, he said, lowering his voice. This isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think, I replied. And more. He straightened, pushing off the counter. You followed me? I observed you, I said. There's a difference. That's not healthy, he said, a hint of reprimand slipping in. We're married. We were, I said, and watched the word land. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Madison and I… He stopped, recalibrated. It was a mistake. No, I said. It was a system. His brow furrowed. What does that even mean? It means you didn't trip and fall into an affair, I replied. You scheduled it, you managed it, you folded it into your work the same way you fold everything else into your life. That's unfair. It's accurate. He stepped closer, hands open. Listen to me. Nothing happened that… Don't, I said sharply enough to stop him. Don't minimize this by pretending I'm asking about degrees of physical intimacy. I'm not. His mouth tightened. Then what are you asking? I'm asking why a preschool needed your legal expertise, I said. Why there was an undisclosed donation in September. Why a teacher disappeared. Why Madison looked like she was being negotiated with instead of loved. That got through. Daniel's composure cracked, not shattered, but fissured. His voice dropped. You don't understand what was at stake. Explain it to me, I said, slowly. He hesitated, then nodded once, a concession framed as cooperation. There was an incident, he said, at the school. A child got hurt. The parents were aggressive. Aggressive, I repeated. Or frightened. Both, he said. They threatened to escalate, to the state, to the press. And the school panicked, I said. Yes. So you stepped in, I continued. Pro bono, as a favor. As a community member, he corrected. As a parent. And as someone who knew how to make problems disappear, I said. He bristled. I advised them on process, on risk mitigation. On silence, I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. Claire, you work in branding. You understand narrative control. I understand truth management, I replied. I also understand when it becomes a lie. He ran a hand through his hair. No one was trying to hurt anyone. Someone already was hurt, I said. That's the point. Daniel looked away. The situation was contained. At what cost? I asked. He didn't answer. I stepped into the kitchen, closing the distance on my terms. What role did Madison play? He swallowed. She was helpful. Helpful how? She was trusted, he said. Parents liked her. She reassured people. And when reassurance wasn't enough, I pressed. Daniel's silence stretched. You leveraged her, I said quietly. You put her in a position where she couldn't refuse. That's not fair, he said again. Isn't it? I asked. She's young. She's not tenured. Her career depends on the school's goodwill. And she was sleeping with the lawyer advising the board. Daniel flinched. That part wasn't planned. Nothing ever is, I said, until it's convenient. He turned toward me, eyes sharp now. You're making this sound predatory. I'm describing power, I replied. What you do with it is on you. Daniel paced, restless. You're blowing this out of proportion. I spoke to Madison, I said. The room went still. You what? We met, I said. She told me about the incident, about the pressure, about you. His face drained of color. She had no right. She had every right, I cut in. She's the one holding the bag if this collapses. Daniel stopped pacing. What did you do? I listened, I said, and then I made a decision. His voice sharpened. What decision? I contacted Evan Brooks, I said. He's investigating. The name hit like a physical blow. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. His control slipped entirely for the first time. You did what? I gave him documentation, I said. Not everything. Enough. You had no right, he said, anger surging. You're risking... Your reputation? I finished. Your firm? Your standing? Our family, he snapped. I held his gaze. You risked our family when you decided you were entitled to manage other people's silence. This could destroy the school, he said. The school destroyed itself, I replied. You just helped it along. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. Do you have any idea what happens if this becomes public? Yes, I said. I do. He laughed once, humorless. Then why would you do this? Because the answer mattered. Because Owen goes there, I said. Because children deserve adults who don't treat harm as an inconvenience. Because you don't get to decide whose pain is acceptable. Daniel stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You're choosing them over me, he said. I'm choosing reality, I replied. You made yourself the alternative. He shook his head slowly. You think you're being righteous. You're being reckless. I think I'm being honest, I said. Which is more than I can say for you. He took a step toward me, lowering his voice. You can still stop this. I raised an eyebrow. How? Call him, Daniel said. Tell him you misunderstood. That there's nothing there. And Madison? I asked. His hesitation was answer enough. She'll be fine, he said finally. She'll land somewhere else. You mean she'll take the fall? I said. And you'll call it unfortunate. Daniel's voice hardened. You're not thinking clearly. I am, I said. For the first time in weeks. He looked at me like a stranger. If you do this, there's no coming back. I nodded. I know. Silence fell between us, heavy and final. Upstairs, Owen shifted in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Daniel's shoulders slumped. I was trying to protect him, he said quietly. No, I replied. You were trying to protect yourself from consequences. He didn't deny it. That night, he slept in the office. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage with a new lens. The missed dinners framed as work, the favors done quietly, the way Daniel always believed he could outthink outcomes. In the morning, Evan texted, Evan, we've confirmed an incident report was filed, then withdrawn. That's not standard. I need Madison on record. I replied, me. She's willing, but she's afraid. Evan, that's understandable. We'll protect her as best we can. I forwarded the message to Madison. She replied almost immediately. Madison, thank you. I don't want to lie anymore. Later that day, the school sent out an email. A cheerful subject line. Fall festival updates. Decorations, bake sales, volunteer shifts. Normalcy deployed like armor. Buried in the middle was a single sentence. Please note, media inquiries should be directed to the board. Daniel read it at breakfast, his face tightening. They're preparing, he said. So am I replied. That afternoon I met Evan again. He showed me what he'd uncovered. Partial reports, redacted emails, a trail of donations routed through a foundation connected to Daniel's firm. Enough to suggest intent. Enough to invite scrutiny. This won't stay contained, Evan said. Once we publish, regulators will follow. And Daniel? I asked. He'll be named if the connection is provable, Evan said. Which it looks like it is. I nodded. Do it right. I will, he promised. As I left, my phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Lasky. Mrs. Lasky. Claire, I've heard you've been asking questions. I'd appreciate a conversation, for the good of the school. I stared at the screen. The good of the school. That phrase again. Always invoked when someone wanted to avoid accountability. I typed back. Me. I'm available at the fall festival. It was a gamble. A deliberate one. That evening, Daniel didn't come home for dinner. He texted instead. Daniel, we should consider a mediator. I looked around our kitchen, the magnets on the fridge, Owen's drawings taped to the wall, the life we'd assembled with the assumption that good intentions were enough. Me. You should consider a lawyer who isn't sleeping with a witness. He didn't reply. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Autumn settling in, stripping things down to what could survive exposure. The fall festival was 3 days away, and by then, there would be no safe corners left to negotiate from. The trap. The fall festival was designed to feel harmless. That was its genius. Bright Harbor transformed itself every October into a theater of innocence. Hay bales stacked into soft geometry, paper lanterns strung between trees, children dressed as animals and astronauts, and things without consequences. The school understood optics the way some people understood prayer. Repeat the ritual often enough, and everyone agreed to believe. I volunteered everywhere. Sign-in table, pumpkin decorating, silent auction coordination. I smiled until my cheeks ached and spoke in the soft, competent tone people trusted. No one suspected a woman who laminated labels and refilled cider urns. I wasn't hiding. I was staging. By Thursday evening, the plan existed in fragments across devices and minds. Evan had corroboration from a former Bright Harbor aide willing to speak anonymously. Madison had agreed to go on record, with conditions. Rachel Kim had quietly connected me to 2 parents whose children had been pulled from the seaside room without explanation. And Mrs. Lasky had begun hovering. She found me near the raffle table on Friday afternoon, her smile fixed, her voice low. Claire, may I have a word? Of course, I said, as if nothing were loaded between us. We stepped aside, just far enough from the crowd to feel private without being so. That balance mattered. I've been hearing concerns, she said. Rumors. I'm sure you understand how easily misinformation spreads among parents. I do, I replied. That's why clarity helps. Her smile tightened. We'd prefer to address issues internally. I'm sure you would, I said. She studied me. You seem very involved lately. I care about where my son spends his days, I said. I thought that was encouraged. It is, she said quickly. Within reason. The phrase landed like a warning. Is there something specific you'd like to discuss? I asked. She hesitated. Your husband has been advising us. I know, I said. And you've spoken to staff, she continued. I have, I said again. Mrs. Lasky leaned closer. If you have concerns, bringing in outside parties could complicate things. I met her gaze. So could withholding information about an injured child. Her eyes flickered. That matter is under review, she said. It's been under review for 2 months, I replied. That's not a review, that's a delay. Her voice hardened. You need to be careful. I smiled, warm and deliberate. So do you. She stepped back, recalculating. The conversation ended without resolution, which was its own confirmation. That night, Daniel came home late again. He moved through the house like a guest who knew he might be asked to leave. We didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. He watched me pack a box of festival supplies near the door. You're enjoying this, he said finally. No, I replied. I'm committed. To destroying everything? He asked. To stopping the destruction, I said. You're confusing the two. He shook his head. You're setting a trap. Yes, I said. And you walked into it days ago. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he looked tired rather than angry. Do you know what happens to Madison if this goes public? He asked. She tells the truth, I said, and deals with the consequences like an adult. And you? He pressed. What happens to you? I paused. That question deserved honesty. I lose the illusion that my life was built on mutual respect, I said. But I already lost that. The morning of the festival dawned clear and cold. The sky was a bright, indifferent blue. Evan texted that he'd arrived early, blending in as a parent volunteer. He wouldn't reveal himself until it was time. Madison texted too. Madison, I'm scared, but I'm ready. Me, stay close to the playground after the costume parade. I'll find you. By noon, Bright Harbor hummed with families. Children ran in packs, candy bags swinging. Parents laughed, posted photos, tagged the school. The optics were perfect. Daniel arrived just after 12:30. He wore a jacket too formal for the setting, a subconscious bid for authority. He greeted board members, shook hands, smiled for photos. He didn't look at me at first. When he did, his expression tightened. You're really doing this, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. You don't have to, he said. You could stop right now. I could, I agreed. But then nothing would change. He scanned the crowd, alert now. Where's Madison? Here, I said. Like you. His jaw set. This is a mistake. Then you should have stopped earlier, I said. The costume parade began at 1. Children marched across the lawn, teachers guiding them gently. Applause rose and fell in waves. Phones recorded everything. This was why timing mattered. I spotted Evan near the cider stand, talking casually with another parent. He caught my eye and nodded once. I moved toward the small stage where Mrs. Lasky stood with a microphone, preparing to announce raffle winners. Board members clustered nearby. Daniel drifted closer, suspicion sharpening into alarm. I climbed the steps before anyone thought to stop me. Claire, Mrs. Lasky began. I took the microphone from her hand. She froze. Not because I was aggressive, but because I was calm. "Hi, everyone," I said, my voice carrying easily. "I promise this will be brief." A ripple of curiosity moved through the crowd. Phones lifted, children tugged at parents' sleeves. "I'm Claire Hale," I continued. "Owen's mom. Like many of you, I trust Bright Harbor with the most important thing in my life." Mrs. Lasky stepped toward me. "This isn't appropriate." "I disagree," I said gently, "because trust depends on transparency." Daniel moved forward. "Claire, stop." I looked at him. "You had your chance." I turned back to the crowd. In August, an incident occurred at this school involving a child who was injured due to supervision failure. Gasps rippled. Murmurs spread. The parents were discouraged from reporting. I continued. A teacher was removed quietly. An anonymous donation followed. No formal disclosure was made. Mrs. Lasky reached for the microphone. I stepped back, just enough to keep it out of reach. "This isn't rumor," I said. "It's documented." Evan stepped forward then, identifying himself calmly. "I'm Evan Brooks. I'm a journalist. I've verified these claims through independent sources." Phones rose higher. The mood shifted from celebration to attention. Daniel spoke sharply. "This is reckless. You're endangering children by causing panic." "No," I said. "Secrecy endangers children." I gestured toward Madison, who stood near the playground, pale but steady. She stepped forward. "My name is Madison Reed," she said, her voice trembling but audible. "I'm a teacher here. I was asked to reassure parents while the incident was contained." Her eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to the crowd. I was wrong to agree. The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Lasky found her voice. "This is highly inappropriate. We will address this through proper channels." "The proper channels were bypassed," Evan said. "That's the story." Daniel's face had gone gray. He looked at me. Not with anger now, but with something like disbelief. "You did this publicly," he said. "You humiliated me." "I held you accountable," I replied. "Public harm requires public reckoning." Board members began speaking over one another. Parents shouted questions. Someone started crying. The festival had transformed into something unmanageable. Police arrived within minutes, not because of danger, but because authority always followed disruption. Regulators followed soon after. By 3 o'clock, Bright Harbor was no longer a sanctuary. I found Madison sitting on a bench, shaking. I sat beside her. "You did the right thing," I said. She nodded, tears spilling. "I don't know what happens now." "Now?" I said. "You tell the truth again when asked." Daniel approached slowly, flanked by a board member. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. "This is going to get ugly," he said quietly. "It already was," I replied. He looked at Owen, who was chasing bubbles with another child, blissfully unaware. "You've changed everything." "Yes," I said, "including what he learns about adults." Regulators sealed offices. Statements were taken. The school issued a hastily drafted apology by evening. That night, after Owen slept, I sat alone in the living room. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from parents, reporters, strangers. One message stood out. From Daniel. "Daniel, I don't recognize you anymore." I typed back, "Me. I finally recognize myself." Outside, the lanterns still glowed in the yard, paper and wire holding light against the dark. But nothing was decorative anymore. Everything meant something. Aftermath and reckoning. The morning after the fall festival, Evanston woke up like a town pretending nothing had happened. The lake looked the same. Joggers traced the shoreline. Cafes opened on schedule. Bright Harbor's sign still stood at the corner of Maple and Ridge, cheerful lettering intact, as if words alone could resist consequence. But the parking lot was empty. A temporary closure notice had been taped to the glass doors overnight, out of an abundance of caution, pending review. Language designed to soften impact. Language I recognized well enough to know it was already failing. Owen didn't ask why he wasn't going to school. Children sense disruption before they had vocabulary for it. He ate his cereal slowly, eyes flicking toward me, waiting for an explanation he didn't yet need. "We're having a few days off," I said. "We'll figure out what's next together." He nodded, satisfied. The simplicity of his trust hurt more than any accusation could have. Daniel left early that morning without speaking to me. He didn't take a suitcase. He took his laptop and a change of clothes, the uniform of a man who believed he could still negotiate terms. By noon, the story had broken. Evan's article went live just after 11, measured, restrained, devastating in its clarity. It didn't sensationalize the affair. It didn't need to. The facts were enough. An injury. A withdrawn report. Legal advice given under conflict of interest. A culture of silence. Daniel's name appeared halfway down the page, contextualized, precise, not vilified, documented. By 1 o'clock, his firm had issued a statement distancing itself from unauthorized community involvement. By 3, he'd been placed on administrative leave. I watched the coverage unfold from my kitchen table, Owen coloring dinosaurs beside me. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Parents thanking me, parents furious with me, reporters asking for comment. I ignored them all. Public reckoning didn't require my narration. I'd done my part by refusing silence. The rest belonged to institutions built to respond, or collapse. Madison called that evening. Her voice sounded older, not weary, resolved. "They've suspended me," she said, "pending investigation." "I expected that," I replied. "I gave my statement," she continued. "Everything." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "They offered me a lawyer," she said, "through the school." "And?" I asked. "I declined," she said. "Evan connected me with someone independent." "Good," I said. "Protect yourself." There was a pause. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for my part in your marriage." I considered the apology, not its sincerity, but its weight. "I believe you are," I said, "but that doesn't make us even." "I know," she replied. We ended the call without ceremony. No absolution, no cruelty, just acknowledgement of harm done and limits reached. 2 days later, Daniel asked to talk. We met at the house. Neutral ground had evaporated elsewhere. He stood in the living room, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning familiar objects like evidence. Owen was at a play date. I'd planned it that way. "I've retained counsel," he said. "So have I," I replied. He nodded. "Of course you have." We sat opposite each other, not close enough to touch, not far enough to pretend distance. "I didn't think you'd go this far," he said. "I didn't think you'd give me a reason," I replied. He sighed. "You know they're investigating everything now." "Yes. And they'll find things," he continued. "Not just at Bright Harbor." "I assumed as much," I said. Daniel leaned forward. "I never meant for it to get out of control." "That's what people say when they confuse authority with invulnerability," I replied. His jaw tightened. "You're enjoying your moral high ground." I shook my head. "I'm standing on ground you set on fire." He looked at me then, really looked. "I don't recognize this version of you. I don't recognize the man who thought children's safety was a negotiable variable," I said. Silence settled. It didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt final. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was practical. Daniel always understood negotiations. I want a divorce, I said. One that doesn't drag Owen through your need to win. He swallowed. And custody? Shared, I said. With conditions. Conditions, he repeated, wary. Transparency, I said. No unilateral decisions. No legal maneuvering disguised as protection. And therapy. For you. Independently. He scoffed softly. You think therapy fixes this? I think refusal guarantees it doesn't, I replied. He leaned back. You've already decided. Yes, I said. That's the difference between us now. Daniel nodded once. I loved you. I know, I said. You just loved control more. He left without another word. The weeks that followed rearranged my life quietly. Owen transferred to a different preschool, smaller, less polished, run by a woman who talked more about staffing ratios than branding. He adapted faster than I did. Bright Harbor's board resigned en masse. Investigations widened. State regulators issued citations. Lawsuits followed, not loudly, but inevitably. Madison accepted a position at another school under strict probationary terms. She texted me once to say she was grateful I hadn't let her disappear quietly. Evan won a regional award for the piece. He credited parent advocacy and refused to name me publicly. You'll still be known, he warned me gently. Just not in headlines. I can live with that, I said. The divorce moved slowly. Paperwork, disclosures, mediated sessions where Daniel spoke carefully, and I listened without flinching. The man who had once filled rooms with certainty now chose his words like landmines. At night, when the house was quiet and Owen slept, I sometimes replayed the early days of my suspicion. The hallway glance, the name spoken too familiarly. I wondered how many lives unraveled not with explosions, but with small permissions granted to the wrong people. One afternoon, months later, I ran into Mrs. Lasky at the grocery store. She looked thinner, unmoored. Claire, she said stiffly. Mrs. Lasky, I replied. She hesitated. I wish you'd come to me first. I did, I said. You told me to be careful. She flinched. You didn't have to destroy the school. I didn't, I replied. I exposed it. She turned away without another word. I watched her go, not with satisfaction, not with guilt, just recognition of consequence. On a clear spring morning, Owen and I walked by the lake. He threw stones into the water, counting the skips. Mom, he said, why don't I go to Bright Harbor anymore? I considered the question carefully. Children deserve truth, but not burden. Because some adults made choices that weren't safe, I said. And when that happens, it's okay to leave. He nodded, accepting this as fact. Are we safe now? I knelt beside him, meeting his eyes. We are. That answer was true, not because the world had become kinder, but because I'd learned what safety actually required. It wasn't silence. It wasn't loyalty to systems that asked for compliance instead of accountability. It was the willingness to see clearly and act anyway. As the water swallowed Owen's last stone, I felt the strange, steady calm of someone who had lost a life and gained a spine. The story people told about me would vary. Some would call me brave, others vindictive. Some would say I'd overreacted. I no longer needed consensus. I had my son's hand in mine, the lake stretching wide and indifferent before us, and a future that, while narrower, was finally honest. That would have to be enough. Daniel, I used to believe control was the same thing as care. That if I could anticipate outcomes, reduce exposure, contain fallout, smooth rough edges, then I was doing something ethical, responsible, adult. It took the collapse of my marriage to show me how childish that belief really was. When the article ran, I read it twice before noon and once again after dark. as if repetition might reveal a hidden appeal. It didn't. Evan Brooks wrote like someone who understood restraint. He didn't need adjectives to bruise me. He let timelines speak. He let documents sit there, unarguable. I recognized my own sentences in the paraphrase of emails. Not quoted, just summarized, cleanly enough that denial felt embarrassing. Administrative leave came quickly. The firm's managing partner called me into a glass conference room that smelled like lemon cleaner and said all the right things in the wrong order. "We value you. This is temporary. We need distance." Distance was the word of the season. I moved into a furnished apartment near downtown. Short-term, neutral, forgettable. A place that looked like it belonged to a man who didn't expect anyone to stay long. I told myself it was for Owen, that stability required sacrifice. I told myself many things that sounded convincing if you didn't test them. At night, the city hummed outside my window. I sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the fall festival in fragments. Claire's voice steady on the microphone. Madison's face when she spoke. The way the crowd leaned forward as if truth were gravity. I'd spent my career arguing that public exposure was dangerous. I'd never considered that secrecy might be worse. People assume affairs are about desire. That's an easy story. It absolves you with biology and impulse. Mine wasn't. Mine was about being seen as necessary. Madison made me feel useful in a way Claire no longer did. Not because Claire didn't need me, but because she didn't require my management. She was competent without me. She didn't ask for rescue. That should have felt like respect. Instead, I experienced it as redundancy. Madison asked questions. She deferred. She listened. When the school panicked after the incident, she looked to me for answers, not because I was right, but because I sounded certain. Certainty is intoxicating. I told myself I was protecting the school, protecting the children, protecting Owen's environment. Each sentence shaved off a layer of truth until the lie fit neatly inside good intentions. Claire saw through it faster than I expected. What unsettled me most wasn't her anger. It was her method. She didn't confront me dramatically. She didn't beg. She observed. She collected. She understood systems because she worked inside them for a living. When she said the affair was a system, not a mistake, she wasn't moralizing. She was diagnosing. The first therapy session was humiliating in the way only accuracy can be. The therapist asked me why I'd believed I was entitled to manage outcomes that didn't belong to me. I tried to answer with philosophy, utilitarian language, risk analysis. She stopped me gently and said, "That's not why. Try again." I sat there, hands folded, feeling the edges of a truth I'd avoided. "I didn't want to be ordinary," I said finally. She nodded, unsurprised. "And when people resisted your solutions?" I pushed harder, I admitted. Weeks passed. Investigations moved at their own pace. The school dissolved into committees and statements. Madison's name surfaced and disappeared in cycles. I didn't reach out to her. Not because I was noble, but because anything I said would sound like pressure. Claire and I spoke only through lawyers and carefully framed texts about Owen. She was fair. That stung more than cruelty would have. On my custody days, Owen asked questions that were sharp and innocent. "Why do you live here now? Why does Mom look different? Did I do something wrong?" Each question landed with surgical precision. "No," I told him again and again. "This is not because of you." I wondered how many times I'd said similar things to adults while rearranging their lives anyway. The day my firm formally severed ties, I felt something close to relief. The performance was over. The version of me that wore confidence like armor had nowhere left to stand. I walked by the lake that evening, watching waves strike stone without apology. For years, I'd believed impact could be negotiated. It couldn't. I thought about Claire, about how I'd underestimated her because she didn't need to dominate a room to hold authority. She'd chosen reality over me. That was the part my pride struggled with most. Not that she exposed me, that she didn't hesitate. In therapy, I learned a word I'd avoided my entire career: accountability. Not consequences, those were external. Accountability was internal. It required staying present without defense. I'm still learning. Some days, I want to call Claire and explain myself one last time, perfectly, to arrange the narrative so she might reconsider. I resist that impulse now. Control is no longer my refuge. When Owen falls asleep on my couch during movie nights, his head heavy on my arm, I feel the full weight of what I nearly traded away for relevance. Love doesn't need management. Trust doesn't survive optimization. I don't know what kind of man I'll be after all this settles. I only know what I can't be anymore. And for the first time in my life, not knowing feels honest.